and I will be co-hosting today with Maud. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I'm a somatic psychotherapist and a RISE consultant, and I've been practicing and teaching embodiment for over 10 years, and I feel like I'm just in the best of company here with Maud. We've really enjoyed putting this webinar together for you all.
Yes, absolutely. Feel free, feel welcome. And yeah, we will bring to you our practices and experiences from bringing embodiment, whatever that means, we'll talk a bit more about that, into organizations, into the world of work, and into the field of leadership. And hopefully there will be something useful for you to take away and maybe even practice in your life.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to speak more about your background, Maud, before I give a little bit more of an introduction? Or?
Yes, absolutely. I'm French and I'm a leadership coach and facilitator. I support organizations to shift to next stage ways of organizing with more conscious leadership, collaboration and innovation. And I really love how the body supports us to tap into purpose, into clarity, to communicate better, and simply to find health and resilience. So yeah, happy to play with you tonight.
Thank you, Maud. We've enjoyed reading, you know, upon signing up, participants have been asked, you know, what they hope to receive from this webinar. So we've really enjoyed reading through your intentions and requests and comments, and gathering from that, we've tried to create a very practical intention for this webinar today. So we're going to be learning some of the foundational principles of embodiment and looking at how they support outstanding leadership. And we're also going to be really practicing quite a bit together so that we can learn some practical tools to support our leadership, particularly in three main areas. So these are the three leadership embodiment capabilities that Maud will be introducing a little bit later, of inclusiveness, assertiveness, and centered listening. And then towards the end of our webinar, we're going to practice some embodied communication to help connect us with purpose and to say what's really important and true to us. And we hope that all of these practices and paradigms will really support each of you in your leadership and the work that you do in the world. So yeah, Maud, over to you.
All right, so we wanted to check in with you, maybe if you could wave if you are a RISE member, so a consultant or other team member of RISE, just so that we can all see who's energizing roles at RISE, and that might be helpful if you're coming for the first time. Those are the guys of RISE. Maybe also mention if you are not part of RISE, but maybe you've participated in another of our webinars, or maybe you've read one of our blogs, or you've engaged with us in a way or another. In that case, you can wave.
Hello.
Hello.
Great. And if you are completely new to our work and you're happy to discover with us tonight, then we would like to say even more welcome, and feel free to wave so we can know that this is your situation. Great. Well, it seems that you are closer to the tribe than we thought. That's wonderful. And you might know as well that we at RISE are a community that is a learning community, and we're really committed to be walking our talk and to be taking our experience seriously. So tonight in this webinar, we really hope that you'll get an experience of how we actually work together all the time. So, you know, we learn things, we practice and try out things in our clients in other fields, and then we bring it to the community. We learn together, we learn from each other, and we really always try to practice ourselves what we bring to our clients. So this work on integrating mind and body, you can know that we are quite geeky about that internally. And we are practicing that in our own retreats, on our meetings, so that we can be more aware and arrive as the whole of ourselves. And this is something we'd like to invite you to do with us tonight.
Thank you, Maud. So in the spirit of arriving with our whole selves tonight, we have some proposed rules of the game, some guidelines that we invite us all to just keep in mind this evening. So we invite us all to have full presence. So wherever possible, really tune in with all of the attention that you have, and see how this call lands, both intellectually, emotionally, and in your body. And we'll be supporting you to track those things throughout the call. We invite neutral listening and curiosity. So if we say something that may or may not land for you initially, just bring your curiosity to it, perhaps ask some questions, and see how your engagement develops over the course of the call. Confidentiality, so please, if anybody on this call shares anything that could be personal to them, please don't share outside of the call. And as always, we have freedom and responsibility for our own experience. So it's always okay to do or not do anything that we suggest. We're not here to traumatize anybody. We are here to invite us to participate in the ways that feel true and authentic and appropriate for each of us. Please come from I, so whatever your experience is during this call, that's your experience. And wherever it feels true, experiment for yourself, ask for what you need and offer what you can. And we certainly hope that you enjoy this call. So before we begin to dive into an experiential exercise to help us all arrive together, we'd like to give you a very, very light touch definition of embodiment. For some of us, we need a little bit of brain food in order to relax into a topic. So Maud, if you could just go to the embodiment slide, thank you. The simplest way, the way that Maud and I most often like to define embodiment, is the subjective experience of the body as an integral aspect of the self. I, not it. So the subjective experience of our bodies is actually a really important and active participant in not only how we're experiencing the world, but what we're contributing to it. So we'll plant these seeds and we'll invite us to continue reflecting on them throughout this call today. And it has to do with how we live as bodies. So not the size or shape, or athletic stamina of our bodies, but more the subtleties of posture, movement, and attention, and how those aspects of our lived experience of our bodies contribute to how the impact that we have in the world, and is actually the substrate for all lines of intelligence. So if we're really engaging and participating in our embodied selves, it actually improves our intelligence and capacity in other parts of ourselves. And we'll hopefully give you a felt sense of that in this call today. It has to do with how we are, not who we are, what our role is. Embodiment has to do with how we are in the world.
Madeline, is it fine if I just bring in something? I noticed that a number of you have your cameras turned off, and that might be because you need to go somewhere, or maybe you're driving, and certainly we don't want you to have an accident. But if you can, and as much as you can, we'd invite you to be with us also visually, because that in turn enables Madeline and I to see where you're at and maybe what you're experiencing, and be able to support you more in your learning. And as always, it's an offer, so you can take it. It might enhance your learning. And we might, at certain points, engage with you with some questions. We're going to do that in a few minutes. Sometimes we'll invite you to share into the chat, and you can do that in typing. Sometimes we'll open the microphones and listen a bit more. So feel free to also share everything that you have there.
Thank you, Maud. All right. So with that invitation for participation, I'd like to offer an embodied arrival activity, which is called the Awareness Walk. So if you would, please stand up from your chair and even push your chair to the side so that you have a little bit of room in the space that you're in. And if you feel comfortable, then do stay on the camera. If you feel like you'd like a little more privacy, then it's fine to step aside from it so that you don't feel like you're being observed, because this practice is for you. It's to support you to arrive in yourself and in this call in an embodied way. So once you've kind of found your comfort zone with this standing up, I invite you to just let your breath deepen a little bit into your body. Perhaps notice the feeling of your feet on the floor. And as you let your breath deepen into your body, you might notice that your body shifts and moves a little bit. Parts of you might relax. Your posture might change. You might notice that you want to have a little stretch. That's really welcome. Yeah, you might want to shake your head and shoulders. So once you've started to kind of gather your attention into your body, I often have an image of a flock of birds landing in a tree when I start to gather my attention into my body. So once that starts to happen for you, if you'd like to just start moving through the space a little bit. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a very big space, and if you sort of walk in circles or squares or however you like, that's totally fine. It's not about distance covered right now. It's about just bringing your body into motion. And as you bring your body into motion, see if the way that you move through the space can somehow express how you're feeling on the inside. So if you're feeling really energetic right now, then you might bounce a little bit, or open up your arms into the space. If you're feeling more tired or downward moving in your energy, your body might droop a little bit. So just bring however you're moving, however you're feeling on the inside, into how you move through the space right now. And you might surprise yourself. So allow this activity to reveal to you new information, how you are in the. And I'll just let you experiment and explore with that for another moment or two. Because you might notice that how you're doing on the inside changes as you start to pay attention to it. This is a key embodiment skill, is to be able to stay with how we're doing on the inside long enough for it to shift and change, and maybe give us some information. So if you will now, just find a natural place to pause in your moving through the space. But you don't have to come back to your computer yet. So just find a place to pause. And now we'll try another activity, which is see if your body, and I invite you not to respond to this from your head, but just let your body respond with what it wants to do. Let your body take the shape of how you're feeling in this moment. So we've been bringing that into our moving. Now we're going to see if we can bring that into a shape. So you might notice that your body just wants to expand and get big, or you might notice that your body wants to contract, or any number of things. It doesn't have to make any rational sense. It's simply beginning to build this relationship with our embodied experience of ourselves. And whatever shape your body has wanted to take on, just take a moment to acknowledge that shape with your mind, with your heart. Welcome it. Welcoming yourself as you are right now to this call. And then we'll try one more activity before we come back to our computers, which is if you'd like to ask your body how you would like to participate in this call tonight. What would you like to bring or to receive? What qualities would you like to bring with you or receive during this call. And just let your body, once again, respond with a shape. What's the shape of this quality or these qualities? What's the shape of whatever it is that you'd like to bring tonight? And then taking a moment to acknowledge whatever it is, whatever these qualities are that your body has offered up. And then take a moment, if it feels appropriate, to just give some gratitude to your body for participating. This might have felt really natural to you. It might have felt a little bit edgy. However it was for you, just offer yourself some thanks. And in your own time, in your own way, come on back to your computers. And if you would, just type into the chat anything that you noticed during that activity about, how was it for you to move through the space? Did it feel enjoyable? Did it feel uncomfortable? Any qualities that you noticed that you're bringing to our call tonight, and any qualities that you would like to bring to our call tonight. So whatever it was about that activity that spoke to you the most strongly, if you would share it in our group chat so that we can start to get a sense of who's here and how we're doing. Thank you, Megan. You're feeling a bit distracted by your surroundings at first, but then you started to settle your mind and feel more grounded. And your intention is to be calm and absorbing.
It's great if you can notice where and how in the body is that. How do you know somatically? Really trying to tap into another intelligence here, primarily the body. What do you notice? It's a real skill.
Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Anna. A bit weary, but in an attitude of openness and inquiry. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, it's so easy for us to have a whole experience of life that goes undetected unless we have time to give our bodies some attention and notice how is it that we're feeling today. The floor just moved and enjoyed their surroundings and felt grounded while connecting with the floor. Enjoying doing an embodied practice again. And Pad noticed that the center today was above the stomach with some tension in the shoulders. Ooh, yes, I feel that. Even when I'm inviting you to describe what your experience was, it might take a little time to be able to actually put it into words. And that's quite normal. That's because we're shifting between modes of consciousness, actually. When we're in our embodied intelligence and we're noticing the sensations in our bodies, we're operating more from our right brain. And when we're speaking and using words to communicate, we're operating more from our left brain. So sometimes it takes a while to switch sides. So it's really normal. But thank you. It's good to get a sense of how we're all doing. So Maud, would you like to give us a few more anchoring paradigms for our call today?
Yes, absolutely. So it's often useful to, when we're investigating a new territory, to have a few maps, a few reference points to tap into that we can use as pointers. They don't describe the whole reality, but it helps us to make sense of it somehow. So here are some of the ones that we commonly use when working with groups like yours. Commonly, we try to distinguish some dimensions of what we call embodied intelligence. So our capacity to bring into our communication, our relationships, our decision-making, the way we process information, the whole of ourselves. So we're all very trained in using the brain, and that's fantastic. We completely want to keep that. And in a complex world like ours, we often work with leaders and people who have responsibilities and who navigate a complex world where it's unpredictable, it's very volatile. And we know that in this context, we need to tap into more than just some paradigms of the mind or some models, because the reality is complex in itself. And so when we tap into the intelligence of the body to nurture our leadership, for instance, here are some dimensions that we're actually tapping into. And you've started practicing some of them with us right now. So the first one is self-awareness, noticing, simply noticing in your muscle tone, in your posture, in your breath, in where your awareness is oriented, in your sensations, your emotions. How am I? And that's a skill, right? You might have noticed when you were asked the question, how am I? It takes a bit of time for us to come with a swift, clear answer. And that's a muscle to build. And why is that important? Because certainly like us, the most and the first thing that you offer is your presence. It's your being, right? This is what impacts people around you, giving them a sense of who you are, a sense of trust, maybe inspiring them, maybe even embarking them in your ventures. We'll touch more on that later. But first, so this first entry point, how am I? Noticing that in the moment. So what's my state? Am I anxious, as I might be a little bit tonight with you? Am I feeling generous? Am I feeling low on energy, etc.? And you might notice over time that you might also notice patterns of, for instance, behavior. How am I when I receive pressure? How am I in the face of losing something or uncertainty? And you might notice in the body some certain ways of reacting that have to speak to how you also react in an analogous way in a verbal interaction, in a conflict management situation, for instance, or other situations. The second dimension is self-regulation. So how am I able, when I notice that I'm in a state, for instance, that is not so useful right now for the purpose of what I want to achieve, and how can I tap into the structure of my skeleton, my posture, to find stability, to find ease? How can I tap into my muscle tone using relaxation to really kind of sense really well and be able to breathe well, to have access to my cognitive capacities? How can I use connection to others so I get out of isolation or tension if I can? We'll speak more about that, mostly practice that later. And then other skills that actually build on that, that we work with, is awareness of others. And you've practiced that as well, right? If you have looked at the gallery view of the screen and maybe you looked at your colleagues, the other participants here, also doing this walk exercise, you might have seen the shapes they were doing, and maybe you had a taste in yourself. Okay, that's the experience that she's having, that he's having right now. Maybe you got an immediate felt sense of what their world might be like just now. And it might be different in 5 minutes' time, right? And I know as well that many of you work with others. That's what you shared with us in your questionnaire. And we know as well that you're familiar with, for instance, influencing the dynamics of the group if you facilitate by maybe reinforcing where the group's at, by acknowledging, or maybe going against, for instance, bringing it a little bit more energy and things like that, which you can do with breath, with posture and movement. We'll touch a bit less on that today because that's a whole build-up, but it's a model that might have given you some useful pointers. Another one that our webinar is constructed upon comes from Wendy Palmer. She was the founder of Leadership Embodiment, and she has derived from mostly the martial arts, Aikido, but also her long-term practice of meditation, some 3 leadership capabilities, if you want, that she brings and we bring together in the world of work, and particularly to support healthy, impactful leadership. So really take that as, you know, as one map of the territory. If that serves you, there are many others. So one capacity is the capacity to include others and to send them through body, mind, and emotions the message that we are in this together. So that might entail being really relaxed, being open, and extending your awareness maybe at the four corners of the room. You can do that right now. Notice how it would be for you if someone opened the door and came in. Could you send that message through your being that it's okay, I see you, we're in this together? The second capacity is centered listening, and that's the capacity to listen to something triggering, like maybe a criticism, yeah, without taking it personally. And that's a way that you can cultivate embodied qualities to really be able to do that, like how you relate to space, how you see the words land, how you can remain connected to your feelings and experience them fully, so you can use them to connect more and actually become creative, even if it's a confrontation. And then speaking up, that's more a triangle shape, and that's about being clear on what's important, what's true for you, and being able to even project that into the space where you're intervening, where you're leading, to be able to take a stand, body, mind, and heart, with clarity and precision, to really say, actually, this matters to me, in a way that invites others to embark with you in that venture. And also doing so, not just from the best of yourself, this alignment of head, heart, and core, but even more maybe, relating to the field, to what's bigger than you and wants you to actually succeed. And we'll touch a bit more on that later. I hope this is useful, and we're happy to point you to other models as well. Over to you, Madelanne.
Well, we are
Yes.
going to now be looking at the distress response as a way of supporting us to develop resilience in intensity. Would you like me to introduce the activity, Maud, before you?
Oh yes, that'd be great.
Okay. So one of the gifts that practicing embodiment can bring us is an increased capacity to shift between states of distress or pressure or discomfort and states of resilience and feeling centered in our own selves. And, you know, all of us in whatever work we're engaging in are under pressure sometimes, feel stressed sometimes. And it's so helpful to know what our triggers are in those contexts and what happens in our bodies when we're under pressure and in discomfort. And then what are some practices that we can use to bring us back to a state of centeredness and presence? And we'll look a little bit, so Maud will carry us through an activity to kind of experiment with what that's like for each one of us. And then she'll lead some activities to bring us back to a more centered place. And then after she does that, I will be introducing a little bit of the neurobiology, the polyvagal theory, which some of us might be familiar with, which really helps us to understand the brain-body connection in our response to stress, which once again will give us more power to shift states intentionally.
Thank you, Madelanne.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, how about we practice? And you'll see that it's very likely that you'll all have material for the activity we're going to offer you now. This activity is about bringing in actually a situation from your daily life. And this will help us start cultivating those capabilities of inclusiveness and also centered listening, and see how we relate to triggering events. And the practice is actually, and we're going to do that together. See if you can bring to mind a real situation that might have happened maybe the last 3 months, something quite recent, where someone said or did something that triggered you. Maybe it irritated you, maybe it frustrated or shocked you enough that when you think about it now, that there's something happening in your body. Maybe there's a constriction somewhere, maybe there's heat or a micro movement or something else. And an important thing is, please don't freak yourselves out. So you might want to select something of medium intensity. So no bosses from hell, no nightmaring toxic stepmothers. This is for next year, it's practice. But for tonight, please stay with, yeah, something that has juice in it, right? But you can deal with it. So we're really practicing in a small pool so we can build up that skill and hopefully bring that into other situations later. Does that make sense? So embodied learning works a lot with building micro skills and then expanding them into our life situations where we need it. So do you all have a situation in mind? Something annoying? Yeah, if so, please raise your hand so I get a sense of that. Okay, well provided here, I can see that. So let's start working with that. Keeping that in mind, what this person said or did, I'd love you to, as much as you want, take with me a first posture, a first way of holding our bodies, which might be if you're sitting a bit slouched, you know, like maybe your spine is a little bit falling down like this, not so erect. See if you can cross your legs, crossing your legs and maybe even crossing your arms, letting your head drop for a moment. Don't worry, we're not going to stay there for ages. But being there, I'd like you for a few seconds to think back about this moment, to what this person did or said. Where was it? Who was present? How did the room smell? What were the words? And as you remind that, please start noticing in your body some sensations that might arise. Changes in temperature, tensions or relaxation, feeling of being tight or spacious or something else. Notice if there are emotions or thoughts coming as well. Please make a very precise note, as if you were a detective. Please make a note of that in the little booklet of your life, because we're going to need that later. And before we move to the next step, let's have a little shake together. That's actually a state shifter tool that you can use with yourself and with your clients, which helps you quickly shift state and maybe find access to a more resourceful self. And I'd like to guide you into a short intervention, something you can literally do anywhere when you need it. We're going to practice centering, which you might have a version of your own already that you're practicing. This one comes from Wendy Palmer as well. So firstly, if you can find on your chair a way of sitting where your spine kind of falls on the chair and it's erect, but it's not so tense. So you can even wave your spine a little bit to check. Oh, okay, yeah. Feeling your feet on the floor. Noticing the flesh. If your feet were on sand, what shape would they make in the floor? Noticing how gravity pours down through your skeleton, from the skull, through the spine, into the sit bones, the legs and the feet. Finding both that gravity. And we're going to use the breath to strengthen and dynamize this vertical axis of ours, this dignity and ability that we can bring in our leadership. So we can inhale up, lengthening our spine to the sky. And with the exhale, making a long exhale, maybe 2-3 times longer than the inhale. It's a practice. Inhaling up and getting noble, really dignified, and then with the exhale, you can use the exhale to support you with gravity to soften tensions if there are any, maybe in your face muscles, the muscles of the eyes or the jaw. See if you can relax your tongue and your mouth, saying, ah. Letting your shoulders be a bit heavier. Sensing if your solar plexus could relax a little bit more. And your belly. Letting your hands rest beautifully where they are. And keeping your eyes open if you can, because we want to practice that in the real world, right? Where the real life hits us. See if you can get aware of the four corners of the room. You don't necessarily have to watch them, but you can notice, aha, yeah, that's the dimension of the room. And we talk about this peripersonal space in neurobiology, which the brain actually maps as an extension of ourselves. And so see if you could try sense the space by waving your arms around. It's like a bubble. And then imagine that you're extending this bubble to the four corners of the room. So staying relaxed, holding awareness of the whole space, of yourself in the space, of people or objects or other beings there. You can include all of that. It's okay. Coming back to notice if you were breathing. If you didn't, it's a good idea to resume, maybe, or test out what happens if you don't. And finding the relaxation. Yeah, you might have noticed there was tightness maybe coming to a certain point. See if you can revert it. Oh, and I notice wonderful awareness, regulation. Yeah. Then maybe thinking of someone who makes your heart smile, someone tender or loving in your life. Yeah, if you're smiling, you want to keep that person. Maybe asking yourself, what would it be like if there was a little bit more ease in my body right now? You might notice a moment of emptiness, and then maybe a sensation that responds. It would be in my shoulders, or it would be in my belly, or maybe in my tongue. Okay, that's an interesting information for you. It's a handle. You can come back to it to find relaxation later. Start relaxing one point and see what happens with the rest. And now from that state, see if you could take back your situation from a moment ago, from your shelf of life, and bring it back in front of your awareness. How do you relate to that event now? What, if anything, might have changed? So feel free to share in the chat your observations. And if you'd like to share verbally, then please raise your hand. Joe with the superpowers will unmute you. Jason, did you want to share? I see you smiling.
Okay, so it's my first experience here, so obviously it's a bit, it's all very, very daunting, but obviously I'm still analyzing and trying to balance out all that's being said at the moment.
Balance, right? Yeah. Celine was sharing, thank you so much, Jason. It seems to resonate with Celine, who was sharing, it was almost ridiculous that I was concerned about it. I'm able to hold it with less anxiety. Madelanne came from a more relaxed place and she couldn't make the other person wrong. Interesting. So that experience is one that where we use a real life situation, right? Something that happened recently. We might use it for an upcoming situation. And sometimes with some of our clients, we use tissues that we throw even at the screen to do the same kind of simulation. We have a trigger and we notice what we do in the body. Yeah, it's like a simulator. And then we change a few parameters, like how do I sit? How do I breathe? Where's my awareness? And we look at, does it make a difference at all? And if so, which one? And so this is what we'd like to unpack now together, Madelanne and I, with you, because so let's see what we're learning here around how, what happens in us actually in the face of receiving intensity. How would you describe what you did in your body? And I'm taking here the strange phrase from my teacher, Paul Linden, who talks about emotions as actions that we do in the body. So what on earth did you practice in your body? Would you say, for instance, that in the face of, so in the first time when you received that, you thought about that criticism or that that thing the person said or did? Did you practice more contraction or relaxation? So feel free to share in the chat or unmute yourselves. Maybe Anne, did you want to share how the experience was for you?
Yeah, should I speak?
Yes.
It was interesting because it was more physical than I imagined. And I thought of the person and the situation, and I found myself just sort of wanting to unclench my hands and sort of let go of, it wasn't anger, but it was a degree of irritation and a sort of feeling of, you know, why don't you listen to me? I've got something useful to contribute here, but actually you're just, this other person was very full of I. Interestingly, the I that you were talking about, but that was coming over so strongly that it was sort of meaning that nobody else's contribution seemed to have any value.
Mm-hmm. So how about you yourself, Anne, in that moment in relation to that person? Did you feel more together or separate?
In when we did the activity and I was recalling that and thinking about how I felt able almost like to come at it with a smile on my face, thinking, just let go of it, you know, it's okay.
So when was that, the second or the first time?
The second time.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you, Anne. What else did you notice in terms of very concrete actions that you did in the body? Remember the detective? What did you notice?
I just noticed myself sort of releasing the tension in my hands, and feeling that I would physically just sit back a bit, which was kind of like letting go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
It was the physical embodiment of letting go of the situation and thinking, so what? It was okay.
Great. So let me ask you a more specific question. Really typically in the first moment, the moment of receiving the trigger, where you hadn't practiced the centering yet, what would you say humans practice in their bodies, their minds and their emotions when they receive intensity? Most of the time.
And we physically tense up.
Tense up, yes. So was that your experience too, Megan?
Well, in this particular situation, I just remember feeling like anxiety in my stomach. So this kind of like curdling, kind of clenching of my stomach, and it was an anxiety, and then you know it just makes me physically tense. So then when I'm taking myself back to that moment, I guess part of me is kind of judging, why can't I kind of do what I can do now in terms of letting go and just noticing what's going on? But in the moment, it's impossible because it triggers you and you're tense.
Yes.
Kind of want to fight back. So it's kind of ready to attack or ready to kind of respond to the other. It's much more reactive and quicker than it might be retrospectively kind of thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. So quite connected to maybe what Anne was saying about kind of adversarial way of relating, right? We are separate, there's you and me, and maybe if we were to stay in that conversation for a longer time, it would just escalate, not really get better, right? Thank you. So yeah, contraction, separation. Did you remember visually what was in your field? Was it a lot, a broad field or tense field the first time? Or is it smaller, big?
I was in a car, so I felt quite trapped.
Mm-hmm.
So that I was remembering feeling trapped. Yeah.
Your attention was on that sensation at that time to feel trapped in the car. Was there any change relative to this after centering?
Yeah, I guess I could see more than just the car.
Wow, interesting. So seeing more, perceiving more, right? So maybe visually, but also maybe, so I'm just building up, I hope it's okay, Megan, on your experience, but I know sometimes people mention in that exercise, noticing sounds when they didn't before, or noticing other people when they didn't before. or movements around. And I know that you have complexity to manage, right? So I suppose that in the face of that complexity, what you'd love to be able to do is to actually be able to receive that data, the huge load of data, and actually process that so you can make apt decisions and move into life and take action as you would love to. Yeah. And so it looks like in the moment of the intensity, this is not exactly what happens. So contraction, separation, a sense of not accessing our full resources. So Madelanne, would you be happy to share with us a little bit of what's actually happening underneath in the neurobiology?
Absolutely. Thank you, Maud. Yeah, I'm really enjoying just hearing this illustration of really the transformation that our bodies go through when we are under stress, when our nervous system starts to pick up on danger cues from our environment, because that's really what's happening. Now, before you read this slide, don't get too into it yet, because I'll just speak to it a little bit. Thank you, Maud. Because I know that once there's a slide up with lots of words on it, then all we do is read it. So I'll introduce it a little bit first. So some of you may have heard of the polyvagal theory before. I'm sure most of us have heard about the autonomic nervous system before. It's the part of our bodies that was designed evolutionarily to help us respond to danger in the environment in situations where thinking and planning would simply take too long. So these are situations that our bodies perceive as being life-threatening. So, and this particular part of our bodies, the polyvagal system, the autonomic nervous system, evolved in the Stone Age, and it hasn't changed very much since. So it was designed to help us to threats like big cats that actually preyed on humans. Humans were the primary food source for several big cats for thousands of years. And so we had to really be able to attune to the danger signals that they might give us and be able to respond quickly by or fighting for our lives or doing one other thing, which I'll describe very shortly. And you can imagine the other kinds of dangers that would have been around us during that period of time. So this is the context that our bodies developed this ability within to respond to danger within a split second. So the main nerve, and it's a cranial nerve, the 10th cranial nerve is called the vagus nerve because it wanders around our whole body. And I believe that in Latin, the word vagus derives from a Latin word that means wandering. So the vagus nerve wanders through our body and controls things like our heart rate, our breathing, our digestion. So these really important functions are controlled by the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, it's called the polyvagal theory because there's a few branches to the vagus nerve. And depending on which branch activates in response to danger, that completely transforms our brains and our bodies. So the three main branches that the vagus nerve plugs us into in an attempt to help us to survive in dangerous circumstances. The first one that many of us have heard of is fight or flight. And in fight or flight, the vagus nerve activates, well, certain parts of our brain interact with the vagus nerve to help it to activate this program that helps blood move from our brains into our big muscles, into our arms and legs and jaw to help us fight for our lives. It releases adrenaline so that our heart's beating faster, so that we're absorbing more oxygen and we're capable of more vigorous activity. And when this pattern activates, like I said, the blood leaves our brain and goes into our bodies, and our ability to practice empathy, self-reflection, these things happen, in the very front parts of our brain that require quite a lot of blood to be active. And those are the first capacities that we lose when our bodies mobilize for fight or flight. So like I say, this is no small thing that happens. This is a complete transformation of our brains and bodies, and a complete transformation of our personalities, really. So the other option that the vagus nerve gives us to respond to danger that it perceives in our environment is what's called the freeze or faint response. So this is a very newly discovered capacity. This is revolutionizing the field of neuroscience and the understanding of trauma and PTSD, because this is the part of the nervous system that's involved in the creation of PTSD, which I won't go into today. But what happens when this part of our nervous system activates is a feeling of lethargy, like we lose all of our body tone. And this is what happens when our nervous system decides we're done for, life threat. It wants to numb us to the pain of death. Now, I know this sounds really heavy and, oh, when would this ever happen in the workplace? But like I said, the nervous system evolved in the Stone Age. It hasn't changed much since. And so it can't really differentiate between different types of danger. So relational danger, even just the pressure to perform well, the pressure to impress a certain client, a certain boss, a certain colleague, the pressure to perform, for some of us, our nervous systems do perceive that as a potential life threat because our future survival might depend on how we're regarded in our workplace. So I just want to say, these nervous system programs are activating continuously beneath our awareness a lot of the time. But this last one that I've just mentioned, the faint response, for some of us, it can feel like getting a little fuzzy or, dissociating a little bit, feeling kind of surreal in our bodies. So it's not always a really huge response that takes over in a really obvious way. It can be more subtle, but the impacts can be quite strong. So before I speak to the last option, the third option that this polyvagal nervous system of ours gives us, I just want to have us have a little shakeout, because sometimes even just talking about these nervous system states can activate some of them in our bodies. So shake out your hands, give a really thorough shake out your feet, shake your shoulders, shake your head. And then as you settle back in, just press a little bit into your feet on the floor. And if you have a desk or something in front of you, I invite you to press into that with your hands and just notice a subtle feeling of pressure in your joints. So what this is a practice that speaks directly to the nervous system, that communicates safety to our nervous system. Feeling pressure in our joints sends a whole lot of sensory data to the nervous system about our position in space, and that helps it to feel that we're safe. So just in case any of us have a tendency to dissociate or to go into fight flight activation, it's really important that we attend to our nervous systems even while we're talking about them. So the third option that our polyvagal nervous system gives us is social engagement. So this is the most recently evolved capacity of our nervous system. And it involves keeping all of our higher brain functions online. So this is the only part of our nervous system response to danger that allows us to sustain our capacity for self-reflection and empathy as a foundation for relationship and connection in the world. So the social engagement system has evolved in mammals, and it allows us to deal with stress and pressure and the threat of danger through relationship with others, through problem solving. So if we understand how to center ourselves, the activities that Maud has shown you really speak to the nervous system at this deep level and help it to come back into the centered place of social engagement, so that when we're under pressure and stress, we actually sustain our abilities to be in relationship with others and be regulated. So I just want you to, I invite you to take a moment to just let that soak into your body for a second. The feeling that you have, maybe that you had at the end of the last interview of really centered and relaxed and calm. And so many of you noticed that when you access that, this state in your body and your mind and your nervous system, that you actually really experienced challenge in a very different way. So let's just end this portion, the little introduction to the polyvagal theory, with a reminder for all of us that with practice, we can notice when our nervous system is activating and we're going into a state that is not optimized for relationship, definitely not optimized for leadership, and intentionally bring ourselves back to a centered place. And that can take practice. You know, going through that centering activity with Maud just now felt so delicious. I really enjoyed it. And I know that in the moment, I don't have time to go through all of those steps to get to a centered place. However, with practice, if I were to do those centering activities that Maud was bringing to us, you know, every day for a week, then it would take me less and less time to work my way back to re-access that centered space that we get to. So really, I invite you to practice these centering tools. Rewatch this webinar, you know, as many times as you need. It will be emailed out to you after this call. So if you want to review the steps that Maud went through. So Maud, would you like to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, and Madeline, you mentioned practice, and yes, so the bad news about this neurobiology is that rewiring our reactive patterns to actually learn other ways to operate takes hundreds of thousands of repetition until it becomes, as the Papua New Guinea citizens would say, knowledge that is in the muscle and not just a rumor. Yeah, so that's the bad news. Oh my God, how am I going to record these 500,000 or whatever repetition? I better not try and just, you know, chop the head off my stepmother. Might be an option. And you might have noticed that we did a number of those repetitions already. So good news, you've started rewiring yourself already. Yeah. So you've already practiced making that shift that Madeline pointed to, and that you can see here between that reactive way that tries to manage people, things, and concept, to a self which accesses more information, more discernment, the capacity to relate more skillfully, to take risks, trusting that there is enough to try, to take a risk, to step in, and which is more interconnected to the bigger field. So you will receive this practice as a handout, but also as an MP3 to practice every day. And you might remember to strengthen your vertical axis, really, whether you're standing or sitting, pressing into the floor, and maybe getting a bit taller, a bit more dignified. And remember, you can use the breath to inhale up, exhale down, relax, letting gravity take your tensions away. And with every in-breath, you can notice another layer of tension and then release it. It's like an onion. It's kind of endless. And then remember to relate to the four corners of the room or other reference points in space if you're in a metro or somewhere in the street. Expand a little bit your awareness and then ask yourself, what would it be like if I had a bit more ease in my body right now, or if I had a bit more generosity, or a little bit more confidence, and maybe noticing sensations. You can come back to this. Also know there are many methods of centering. This one is not the only one. So find the one that works for you. That's the best. Yeah. Thank you really, Madeline, for helping us see how this is deep. It's connected to our archaic animal being, and it brings together all those layers of ourselves, which go to the animal, to the sacred, to the history, to the emotional, to the relational, right? The body is, it takes stock of our whole life, of the whole of who we are. And that is the spirit where we'd like to invite you into the next section. Did you want to touch upon like our intention for that part of the webinar, Madeline?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Maud. Yeah, so hopefully we've given just a sense of how developing greater awareness of our embodied state and building some skills, actually, you know, like going to the gym, you know, you have to commit, you have to practice. Building some embodied skills can actually help us to be more versatile, responsive, and engaging as leaders. And so this next activity, this next area that we're going to focus in is another way that we can start to practice embodiment to support our leadership. specifically in connection to purpose. So, you know, having a clear relationship with my personal purpose, the purpose of an organization that I'm working for, gives me the confidence and the forward momentum to continue even when things are difficult, even in the face of doubt, in the face of, oh, there's a lot of work to be done to achieve this or that. My connection to purpose is really what motivates me and helps me to move forward. And Maud has put together some embodied activities that can help us relate to purpose in a really strong and dynamic way. Oh, can't hear you.
Do you understand why I love working with this lady? So maybe if you'd like, once again, we'd love to really invite you to bring the real material of your life, you know, those contexts where you really want to make a difference, where you're contributing, you're wanting to make impact. And this doesn't have to be spectacular, big woo-woo, you know, American style peak experiences. No, we're talking about those differences that you make every day in the way that you interact with people, you bring them awareness, you lead them through maybe some obstacles, some challenges towards expressing together this what matters to you, what you really want to bring more into the world. And so maybe as an entry point into the next practice, I'd like to maybe invite you to step up with me and stand on your feet if you have even just a little bit of space in your room. And this is going to be a practice of clarifying. So how can we use the body, we talk as a way of practicing somatic inquiry, so using the body as a segue to meaning, to sense, rather than starting with the mind. So we're going to use an archetypical shape here, that shape of the triangle, and maybe that will remind you of martial arts. And notice if you like that, as soon as I announce it, what are you doing in your body? Embodiment happens all the time. So maybe what you could do is standing on the floor and putting one foot forward and one foot back, as if you're taking a stride stance like this. Your feet are shoulder width apart, so it's kind of really stable and heavy, and the weight is 60% to the front. And see if you can step in like this, step in and cut with your hand. So you're using the front hand is the same side as the front leg. So left and left or right and right. And you're literally cutting as if you had a sword, yeah, cutting into the space. And as you practice this, you're already shaping yourself in the shape of a triangle, right? You might even look in front of you, maybe beyond that screen that you were looking at. And with your hand pointing to that further wall or window, see if you can project a point on the wall and put your intention there. We're going to refine this topic that we'll work with. What is one thing that really matters to you at the moment? Something you'd like to contribute to in the world. And once you've put that point on the wall and projecting your intention there physically, visually, see if you can imagine a huge triangle that has its sides along and has the back, which is really wide behind you. Yeah. So notice the sides have a clear delimitation. There's what you care about, what's in your purpose, and that's what's outside of it. Yeah. In order to care about something, you're going to have to not care about other stuff. Yeah. What is yours to do? What is not yours to do? Imagine that what really matters to you is inside this triangle and in the space. And maybe start asking yourself if behind you were all the people who will benefit from you doing this work in the world, even a small difference. People who have seen you, they know your capacity, they know what you're able to. People who love you anyway, whether you succeed or fail, they're here. And literally imagine that you're putting their faces behind you. And this is the concept of what Wendy Palmer calls the posse. Remember that in the Western films where the sheriff would go and hunt the bad guys, and he would hire other folks to come with their horses and help him? They would all stand behind him, right? There would be a huge crowd, and they would make a lot of noise and yeah, in the desert. So imagine those people are behind you. Imagine them visually, put their names there, make it super clear. And this is the practice that you can come back to every moment in this next exercise. We're going to practice a declaration exercise. So as we step into the world, you know, and you've experienced that we are often challenged to speak out what is true or important for us. And we're going to face probably disagreement, lack of interest, maybe mild doubt. You know, those people who say, wow, that's great. You're really sure people are going to buy this? Or, wow, that's wonderful. It's kind of ambitious, yeah? Do you sense that the feeling that maybe you have in your body when you hear this? So how do you come back to your horse and actually express your intention again and bring all your resources and maybe a little bit more to the game? Does that sound like something useful? If so, please give me a thumbs up, 1 or 2. Yeah, cool. Those who have more, feel free to be more. So let's practice that together. Here's the form. Even if you just have 1 step of distance between where you stand and your screen, I would like you to project yourself actually in gallery view. Let me stop the screen share. So you're going to see all those wonderful human folks practicing with you. And here's what we're going to do. So we're going to center ourselves. So feeling our feet on the floor, long exhale, relaxing belly, shoulders, tongue. And first we're going to, so ask yourself this thing that matters to you, connecting to your head, and you might even touch your head if that's useful. Ask yourself, how is this true from this center of yourself? How is this true? What do you know about it? And then the shape is going to be, let me demonstrate. You're going to walk in front of the screen, and you're going to speak out your declaration in 1 crisp sentence. So don't worry, you're muted. No one will hear you. But please voice it out loudly so you can see how you impact yourself and what words actually come out. Yeah, and then you will pause, sense a little bit how that was for you. And then you'll turn back. And then we'll connect to another center, etc. Are you happy to practice together? Yeah. So let's all stand up. And so in that sense, please bring to mind again that contribution that you'd like to make. And see if you can step in with your hand, clarify, what is it? You don't have the whole evening to do that. You have this moment. Don't try and make it perfect. You know what matters to you, yeah? And then see if you can project that intention onto the wall in front of you, create the sense of a triangle, and bring to mind 2 or 3 people who really care about this too. And then let's start together, connecting to your head. Everything that you know about this. Let's walk together and declare. Go. So little hint, if your lips are not moving, we can see you. Notice what you're doing in your body as I say this. You can always center. Fine, great. How was that for you? What were the words that came out? How did it feel to you? Because you might have noticed, you might have impacted others, but you also might have impacted yourself, yeah? So let's come back. Centering again, if you can. Feet, belly, tongue, 4 corners of the room. Touching your heart, you can ask yourself, how is this true? Noticing the beat of your heart, the space of your chest. Then when you're ready, walking towards the screen and declare. Nice. Sense how this one is for you. What was similar or different to the previous declaration? Now let's go back to our initial point, quick centering. Touching your belly, that space at your core, the core of your being, that space where in martial arts the action and the risk-taking stems from. How is that true here? Sense into that space. And now, let's walk and declare. I am committed to supporting integrity. So which words did you use? How was the tone of your voice? How was the sensations, the emotions, and the thoughts? Great, let's continue. Now you're getting warmed up. So the practice here is to now center again and see if you can rub your hands together, feeling that heat, good heat in the middle of the winter, and using it to connect head, heart, and core. Noticing for yourself, I am all of this. How is this true from all these centers at one? Then let's walk together and declare. So that is, notice how that one was, operating from the whole of yourself. And then now comes the last one. And it's building up on everything you've already practiced. Standing up one last time. See if you can center yourself quickly. Posture, relaxation, space. Thinking of someone who makes you smile. And again, noticing in space your intention. Ask yourself, noticing the back of the triangle behind you. Maybe you can even touch your back if you need. Who are the people who will benefit from this work? People who know your capacity. People who love you anyway, regardless of the outcome. Bring to mind as many faces as you can. And now, let's come together, walk, and declare. So we've gone through 5 rounds of this. Maybe you mentioned the same words every time. Maybe other words evolved, and maybe sometimes your sentence resonated more to you. When did you feel most energized? What did you notice about this practice? Maybe you'd like to unmute yourself and share how that experience was for you. How is it for you to mobilize different centers of yourself, align them, maybe connect to something more? Anne, did you want to share?
I felt, as I repeated the declaration, I think I felt my commitment increase. So I felt stronger. So I was thinking of something that I'm going to be doing tomorrow. And, just felt there was a stronger sense of intentionality about what I was going to do. And as I declared, I think that my slight sense of anxiety about what I was going to be sharing tomorrow receded, because I thought, no, you know, it is something I can do. So there was something positive and intentional and energizing about it.
Oh, you're muted, Maud.
Peter, was there something similar or different in your experience? If you're happy to share.
Yeah, I felt quite calm as well, and relaxed. I'm quite a head person though, and so.
Lots of head people here. Don't worry.
But I sort of felt that it's. Yeah, I'm certainly less tense. I'm certainly more focused than I was before.
Here's an interesting one. Maybe was there one of those three centers that maybe made most difference to you when you consciously connected to it? You know, specifically, maybe the head, maybe the heart, the belly. Is there any?
I think it's not. It's the consciousness really. It's being conscious more, being in the here and now rather than in all different things.
Thank you for bringing. Sorry, Peter?
I think we should do that as individuals a lot more often.
You might want to know that sometimes we do that in front of a mirror. And what I love as well is sometimes we discuss about microscopic waves of practicing. Yeah, sometimes you're in a boardroom meeting or you're in the street and you can't really be doing interpreted dance or, you know, shaking. So how can you practice that when the only thing you have is maybe your eyes, maybe your muscles, the muscle tone, maybe your hands or your feet. There's always a microscopic way. Notice how just enlarging the visual space, like maybe just looking at two corners of the room, how did that impact you? How did it impact you maybe just to sense your belly? Maybe you can use the clothes for that, noticing where your trousers meet your belly or something like this. Maybe just sensing your feet. You know, what's your entry point that enables you, as you were saying, to come back into that moment? And then you know that you can use the centering or something like that. And from that entry point, you can bring the rest of yourself. Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. And we'd love you to keep us posted about how that goes. Thank you, Peter.
I'd love to share
how
yes. It went for me. I love that exercise. I noticed a completely different quality from each of the centers. So, you know, when I was coming from my head in relation to my purpose, I had almost a should about it, like, oh, I should do this or this. When I came from my heart, I just felt this very effortless kind of expansiveness to the purpose that I was engaging with. And then when I connected to my belly, I felt really grounded and strong. And I could feel that strength and that groundedness kind of filtering upwards and informing, you know, my heart center and my mind. And then when we were aligning them all three, it just felt really somehow like I was coming from my fullness. There was a sense of real potency in that for me. And I was reflecting on the fact that, you know, neuroscience is now showing us that we actually have nerve tissues and neurotransmitters in our hearts and in our bellies. And, you know, to such an extent that there's actually quite a lot of debate about which brain is actually the most important. You know, we've given a lot of attention to this brain up here, but we do have a brain in our heart and a brain in our bellies, and that's just beginning to be investigated. And I think that, you know, accessing the intelligence of all of our whole brain is going to become a really exciting area of cultural development and of skill building. And I could really feel that in that activity, you know, the different qualities of intelligence that I can bring to how I'm engaging with something.
Thank you, Madelanne. Wow, learning lots of good stuff with you. I know this. You were talking about neurobiology as well, Madeline, and I think there are some recent discoveries in the field of neuroscience that also back up this relationship between which part of us are we actually bringing into the game, you know, as we lead and we take that risk of stepping in and saying, you know, that matters. I'd love to do that with you, and it's not necessarily going to be easy, but you know, let's go for it. There's a bit of science around that. Would you like to share with us in a moment?
Sure. Are you speaking about the interpersonal neurobiology?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, something that Maud and I also wanted to touch on in this call was the fact that when we are engaging with our own embodiment, when we're developing the muscle to be able to shift states within ourselves and access these different qualities of intelligence and activation or calmness within our own systems, we're not just doing that for ourselves. Of course, these things impact, you know, our own performance and our own capacity for relationship, and that's really important. But another really remarkable piece of information is that our bodies are continuously communicating body to body. And in fact, we're designed to self and co-regulate. So our nervous systems are designed to be taking in information from other people's brains and bodies to inform how they should be functioning. So my brain is not meant to know all by itself which state of activation it should be in any given state. It's looking for cues in other people's bodies and brains because the most direct line to the brain is through the body. So by tuning in to somebody's body language, I'm actually tuning into their patterns of brain activity. And I'll speak more to that in just a moment. But our nervous systems are actually designed to be continuously tuning in to the nonverbal, the body-based signals and cues that tell us about the nervous system states and the states of consciousness and the qualities of intelligence that are being accessed by the bodies around us ongoingly. And this plays a really powerful role in shaping our group cultures and shaping our group performance. Because you can imagine that if I'm in a position of leadership in a group and my body is continuously sending out signals to the other brains and bodies that I'm interacting with, that I'm perceiving danger and that my nervous system is activating, you know, you can probably see even just from my body language right now, and you might notice how you feel in relation to me becoming more tense. You know, my eyes just sort of darting around, my breath is constricted right now. Just notice the impact in your body when I do that. Whew, and I'll shake that off. We can all shake that off. Because it's, you know, one theory around why this is the case is that it's a survival tactic, you know, because if one member of our group is perceiving danger, the quicker that my body then mobilizes for danger, the more likely I will be to respond in a way that will save my life. So, I mean, that's one motivation for this phenomenon that we call interpersonal neurobiology. There are other reasons that are quite lovely. For example, it's this body-to-body communication that forms the substrate of our sense of self, other, and relationship in the early years of our lives. So when we're, you know, infants, when years 0 to 3, the left side of our brains is actually not active. We're relying on the right side of our brains, which processes information in a sensory, body-based way rather than a cognitive and linear way. We're relying on our right brains to help us anchor a sense of self, a sense of other, and a sense of relationship. And we do that through attuning to the body-to-body signals that we're receiving from the people around us. And that continues throughout our lifetimes. So it's really, really formative in those first 3 years of life. That nonverbal relational matrix is actually what wires up our brains initially, but then throughout life, it remains the core anchor point for our sense of relationship with others in the world, is this body-to-body communication that's happening all the time. So when we are practicing centering and regulating our nervous systems, when we are connecting in with these different centers of intelligence that we have in our bodies, we're informing our own performance, but we're also opening up potentials within the groups that we're a part of. Without people sometimes even consciously knowing that that's what's happening, they just start to feel a certain way in our presence. And then magically the group begins to activate different potentials and more creativity than they may have been able to before. So this field of interpersonal neurobiology is a really important field for us to understand when we're looking at leadership and when we're looking at group culture. So I think
Thank you so much, Madelanne.
Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, Maud. I think that brings us to the end of all of the content and information that we wanted to share today, and we'd like to leave a few minutes just to hear from you. If you have what your takeaways have been, and if you have any questions, but certainly what has stimulated thought or response in you today, and you're welcome to share that in the chat, or just raise a hand. Since there's a smaller group of us now, we can actually engage with each other that way. And Maud, if you would, is it okay to turn off the? Yes. Then we can see each other all at one time. Yeah. Thank you. So either in the chat or just raise a hand and you'll be unmuted to share. It's good everybody's reflecting.
For me, the thing was the impact of distractions. So in the last thing we were practicing, my boyfriend got home and started having a loud phone conversation in the room next to me. So it was like practicing something new to me, and then with a particularly difficult situation, and like noticing the irritation coming up and wanting to just walk out that door and go and tell him to be quiet, and being like, no, like come back. So I guess my intention is to practice it again with a slightly easier situation, just reflecting on distractions in general and how they can always happen, and you can't always have like a perfect situation because life isn't.
That's the truth.
Did you notice, Joe, if there was any thing that you practiced in your body, as small as it might have been, that helped you come back in the present moment?
I think just listening to your voice really it focused back.
And where in your body did you first notice you were back?
I'm not sure. More practice needed for that fine-tuning of awareness.
Thank you.
I was just really taken aback by the interpersonal neurobiology. I was just reflecting on a group situation I was in recently, which was quite a difficult one with quite a lot of, I think, anxiety and some anger in the group underneath the surface, and I remember consciously watching what was going on and observing, and just very conscious of these little mirror neurons going around the group. I didn't have a word for it, so now I have a word for it, which is really, really helpful. And reflecting for my own self, I've recently been doing some different work and in a new context, which has been quite stressful because of the impact of change on yourself personally, which is always bigger than perhaps one thinks. But reflecting on, it was just been good to do these exercises in the centering. I've been looking at some Gestalt practice as well, and just reflecting on some of the similarities in terms of feeling the floor, feeling the chair, being in the moment. So yeah, been really, really useful.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Lovely to have your participation on the call. Oh, Peter, can't hear you.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, I was just wondering, is there anything that some kind of tapes or CDs or anything that you can also listen to, but you get a lot of music and And so it's just a quick kind of thing, even when you're in the car, just to get your mind back into so
To help you center.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, Peter, you might be delighted to hear that we'll send you an MP3 of the centering process. So you'll have the 30 seconds version, which you can do where, you know, it's kind of okay enough. And you have the 3-5 seconds short version, which we might do right now. You know, just see if you can adjust your posture. Relax with the out breath. Open your gaze, notice 4 corners. Think of someone who makes you smile, yeah, and even smaller. Like Wendy Palmer talks about this lizard push-up. That's a really cute one. You know, the lizards when they're on the stone like this with their little hand, and suddenly they're slouched. So, oh, I'm kind of annoyed, or I'm a little bit like, oh, and then you can, yeah. So that sense of okay, I'm doing this. I caught myself. That's a great thing. And then awareness. Okay, choice. How do I want to be? Yeah. So I think it's really great if you can build repetition and let us know how it goes. You'll receive that with the recording of the session. Do you have an idea, Joe, of when would that be?
Either tomorrow or the day after. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us tonight and for staying with us to this concluding moment. It's been a really lovely time to be with you.
Yes, and we look forward to seeing you on the path of practice where the rubber hits the road. You know, those moments where it's not necessarily comfortable, but you're bringing the new muscles, the new neural pathways of finding a bit more connection to your potential, a bit more choice, a bit more range in how you show up, and hopefully finding beautiful outcomes for what matters to you. Let us know how that lands for you. And stay tuned, because you will receive further invitations for us for upcoming topics as of next year. Do you already know, Joe, which one will be the topic for the next quarter?
Yes, it will be working virtually.
So thank you so much. And it was a delight having you all. And thank you, Madelanne, for this beautiful work together.
Yeah, thank you, Mad. Delight to share this with you.
See you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.